I got my best friend's boyfriend to break up with her. Am I a hater for that? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My best friend is pretty much the girl every guy wants to be with, and every girl wants to be like. Her and I met in the 2nd grade, and we're now 22 years old. We've known each other our entire lives. Growing up, she was definitely the prettier one, and the boys definitely let us know that. She was the one getting asked out, always getting hit on, always being chased by boys, and I, on the other hand, barely got any attention from guys. I know that this created a huge problem for me, even though I never voiced it to her. I became insanely jealous every time she got a boyfriend, and worse, every time she went on a date. From the time we turned 15, she was basically going on a date every single weekend. Oh yeah, and she had the perfect parents too. They trusted her so much because she got really good grades in school, so they decided to buy her a car when she was 16. My parents, on the other hand, didn't trust me for shit. I couldn't do anything by myself. They didn't give me a car actually ever. I bought my first car when I was 19. Her and I were also just very different people. She loved being around people. She was voted most likely to succeed, and she loved theater and she was always cast in the best parts. I was more of a shy girl. I didn't like talking to guys, and if anybody ever hit on me, I always assumed that it was just like a bet or that they were trying to play me. Mostly because why would they look at me when she's standing right next to me? Now, don't get me wrong. Her and I actually have a great relationship. She comes to me whenever she has boy trouble, and I try to give her my best advice. I was also very protective of her. Girls were always jealous of her and trying to do something, and I constantly had her back. She could always come to me whenever she had a problem, and I would always be there. During prom, a girl tried to ruin her dress, so I beat her up. That's the kind of friend I was. Even though, yes, I was jealous and sometimes envious. We went to the same community college, and this is when things got bad. She started dating a new guy, and I hated him. He manipulated her at every turn, and she could never see it. So I did what I had to do to break them up. Part 2 is up. I manipulated my best friend's boyfriend to break up with her. Am I a hater? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Here are all the reasons why I hated him. He was a good boyfriend. He loved her. He procured her. He was protective and sometimes even possessive, but in a good way. The kind of possessive that every girl wants her boyfriend to be. He wasn't jealous. He wasn't envious. And he always took care of her. No matter where he was always thinking about her. He would text her good morning text, check up on her during the day, and call her after classes every day. At this time, her and I were both still living at home, even though we were going to college. And her boyfriend would drive 45 minutes out of his way just to go drop off some ice cream if she had her period. He was tall, dark, and handsome. He was the boy every girl wanted in class. And her and I know this because once they started dating, 4 different girls came up to my best friend and told her how lucky she was to be with him because he didn't get with just any girl. He waited for the perfect girl to come around, and that was my bestie. But here's what I hate even more. I loved hanging out with them. They made me look forward to possibly meeting someone who would love me the same. He gave me hope that there were other men like him. One day, one of his best friends asked me out, and it was my lucky day. We went out to dinner and he kissed me. I actually fell in love with this guy. I had never gotten so much male attention before, but then he ghosted me. My anger began to poison me inside, and suddenly I knew I needed to break them up, because if I wasn't going to be happy, neither could they. I started silencing her phone so that when he texted or called, she wouldn't answer. And this made him angry right away. I also planted a seed, the jealousy seed. I told her that a guy asked her out and she said yes. This made him even angrier. He didn't even bother to ask her if it was true. He just assumed that I was telling him the truth. After a couple of weeks, he stopped calling her. She started crying, and it made me happy, eventually leading to them breaking up. Am I terrible? Yes or yes? My husband used all my savings to buy himself a car. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was from me on Instagram. This is why you should always keep your money separate from your husband's. I made the huge mistake of actually getting a joint account with my husband when we first got married. 2 months after we got married, I landed my dream job. It was corporate bliss. I was earning 6 figures a year with benefits and insurance, while my husband, on the other hand, was starting up his own business. I loaned him $20,000 to start his own business, and he got lazy. Within 2 months, he stopped the business. And when I asked him why, he said it was just too hard. I asked him to hire somebody to help him out, and he refused. This is when he asked me to give him a loan to buy a car. I said no, but because we have a joint account, he had access to all my money. We would fight almost every single day about the damn car. I went away for 2 days on a business trip, and when I came back, he had his damn car. Guess what his excuse was? He feels emasculated because I earn more money. So in some way, he has to control the money, which means he gets to spend it on whatever he wants, including a car. My family thinks I should divorce him. The car was $160,000, and he's telling everyone he bought it himself. I'm embarrassed. What should I do? Self-care sister.
My fiancé confessed that he's ashamed of my poor family. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I grew up really poor, but my family has come up in life. My father opened up his own business and my mom and him run it. Although it's not a huge lucrative business, it's still comfortable enough for my siblings and I to be happy. Because of the way that I grew up, I knew that I wanted to marry a rich man, and he had to be rich. I had 5 serious relationships before I turned 25. I broke up with each guy because I knew that they weren't going to be able to give me the life I wanted. There's 2 things I know. I did not want to get to 27 and not be married, so I knew I had to act quickly. Started hanging out where I knew rich people would hang out. This is where I met my bestie. This girl had my back. If she was going to Paris, she'd take me to Paris. She would pay for everything. My parents neglected her and my family basically took her in. So she would come to my parents' house once or twice a week to have dinner. A few weeks later, she introduced me to my now fiancé. And she hated him. She told me to stay away from him, but I couldn't listen. See, he's hot, plus he has money. And he targeted me. The first night he met me, he could not stop looking at me. We hung out every day for a week, and after that, he asked me to be his girlfriend. Of course, I said yes. A few months later, I moved in with him. My family approved. His family loved me too. Sometimes he would comment on my family's house, or the way that they dress. My parents came over to his parents for dinner. He told my dad in passing that it looked like he didn't have enough time to get ready. My dad was wearing a button-up shirt. He and I got into a huge fight that night, and that's when he confessed that he was embarrassed by my family. That's when my boyfriend's parents asked me to forgive him. They said they were ashamed of his behavior. I forgave him, and once I did, he proposed. He told me he wanted me to be a stay-at-home wife. That was my dream. All I wanted was to have kids and raise them at home. Parents were happy about the engagement, and so were his. As we started planning the wedding, he started saying things like, "I hope your parents aren't going to wear what they usually wear to the wedding." And he insisted that my dad needed to buy a $3,000 suit. Otherwise, he wouldn't look expensive enough. And that's verbatim. We got into another huge fight. He showed up to my house with a Mercedes apologizing. I'm not sure what to do. Should I even marry him? I know my life with him will be complete luxury. What should I do? My boyfriend confessed that he's bi. What should I do? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Instead, I'm on Instagram. My boyfriend has always been a little bit femme. A little backstory on how we met. We go to the same college and we ended up in the same class. To be completely honest and frank, I thought he was gay from the moment I met him. And because I thought he was, I allowed myself to become his friend. You see, at this point in my life, every time I try to have a friendship with a guy, he would always just try to hit on me. Therefore, I could not trust a guy to be my friend. But my boyfriend, let's call him Ben. Ben was different. He was gentle and very sensitive. Now look, I didn't ask him, "Are you gay?" But several other people in my class and I thought that he was. One night, a bunch of us went over to a friend's house. Ended up being kind of a party. People showed up from another college. There was about 20 of us at this get together. 2 hours into the night, I look over in a corner and there is Ben making out with a girl. So at this point, it's confirmed that he is not gay. After a couple of months of friendship, I decided to confess that I thought he was gay the whole time. That's when he laughed and said, "That's crazy because I've had a crush on you ever since I met you. Because we're friends, I don't want to jeopardize anything between us." Then he kissed me. I was confused and I didn't know how to respond to him. So I just said, "Thank you." And thank you for letting me know. We both laughed and after that, we just kept our friendship going. That's when I realized I started catching feelings for him. One night I decided to shoot my shot, told him I thought he was cute, and after that, we made it official. We were in a fully committed relationship. Fast forward a year, things got weird. I had a new lab partner, let's name him Chad. Chad was really good looking. Of course, I was in a fully committed relationship. I was totally in love and head over heels for Ben. Also, Chad had a girlfriend, and he was just very respectful. Chad and I had to get together to finish a project. I told Ben that I was going to go to Chad's. That's when Ben blew up. He freaked out and told me that I should never go to a random guy's apartment. His behavior was completely bizarre. He was jealous. He had never behaved like that before. He asked me to keep my contact with Chad to a minimum, which is practically impossible since our professor put us together for this project. We were stuck together for the rest of the semester. After that, Ben was always in a bad mood. Anything I would say would set him off. He always had this stinky girl attitude. Finally confronted him and asked him why he was always in a bad mood and acting like a stinky bitch. That's when he confessed that he might be attracted to boys, that he thinks he might be bi. This was soul crushing to me. I felt absolutely gutted. So this not only means that girls are my competition, but also guys? I started to cry when he told me this, but I didn't want him to think that I was freaking out. So I told him that it was okay and that we could talk about it some other time. Then he said, "I have to say something else." He confessed that he had a crush on Chad. But the reason he got angry that I was going to go to Chad's is because he's jealous that I'm hanging out with Chad and he's not hanging out with Chad. The whole time I thought he was jealous because I'm his girlfriend, but no. Then he told me he had a crush on 3 other guys in our year, and one that was above us. I couldn't help it and I asked him if he was still attracted to me. That's when he told me that I was disgusting for trying to make it all about me. He even called me a narcissist. Then he gave me the cold shoulder for 3 days. When I was finally able to get him on the phone, he told me that he was just confused. Then he asked me if I could stay away from Chad. This is when I went crazy on him. I told him that him confessing all of those things to me and not even considering how I might feel is terrible, and that he was the narcissistic one. He apologized and asked me if we could try to work things out. Later that day, I'm in class sitting next to Chad and I'm trembling and and crying, turns to me and says, "Are you okay?" Then he takes me outside of class to just take a breather. And I told him everything that was happening with my boyfriend, except for the part that my boyfriend has a crush on him. Chad was so nice about it. He said that I should just take my time and give him the space to breathe. But then something else happens. Chad and I finish one of our projects. That's when he says to me that he actually can't be my friend because he's attracted to me. And he told me that basically we shouldn't speak anymore because he's got a girlfriend and what he feels for me is wrong. I was confused. At this point, I was barely attracted to my own boyfriend after finding out he's bi. Does that make me a bad person? I don't know. I want my boyfriend to be mine. Then I started getting feelings for Chad. He's always been extremely handsome and very considerate and kind. He was the only person that tried to help me out when I was hurting, but he did ask me not to speak to him anymore. I have nobody to talk to. My boyfriend asked me for space, and of course I said yes. 2 nights ago I found out that he hooked up with somebody else. He's a liar. I'm planning on speaking to Chad soon. Give me your advice. What should I say? Self-care sister out. My bestie abandoned me after I paid for her entire baby shower. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I'm sending it on Instagram. Met my best friend Connie, by the way, Connie is her real name, back in 2016 at a work outing. When her and I met, we vibed so much. It was like her and I were sisters. We connected quickly and we connected on a lot. We were both in toxic relationships at the time. You see, I was married to a complete asshole, and apparently so was she. As you can see, we developed a relationship based around this, so we got close really quickly. I really thought she was going to be in my life forever, and it was like that for a long time. A few years later, I left my husband, and I remarried to a man called Adam. He's the most amazing guy in the entire world, and I'm so lucky to have him. Immediately, Adam and I started trying to have a baby with no luck because there were fertility issues on my end. To say that this was devastating is an understatement. I know everyone says they want to be a mom. My dream has always been to be a mom. When we found out about my fertility issues, it was really traumatizing. But Connie was there for me the entire time, and she was super supportive. But after a while, I just stopped talking about it. It was too painful. And this is around the time that Connie met her man, and I was so happy for her. They had been together a couple of months, and out of nowhere, she was pregnant. I was crushed. Although I was happy for her, I was so sad. Of course, I wanted to be supportive, so I offered to plan the baby shower. At the time, I was working 3 jobs, and Connie knew this. This is important to remember. I had been touring banquets to find the perfect one, but of course I needed it to be affordable. Put a deposit down and I worked my ass off to pay it. It gets worse. Part 2 is up. My bestie abandoned me after I paid for her entire baby shower. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's on my Instagram. I was working 3 jobs to pay the baby shower. Put a deposit down on a banquet. Worked my ass off to pay the rest of it. This is when casually Connie told me that she wanted to change the day of the baby shower. Days after I already put down the deposit on the specific day she had asked for. Now she's telling me she wants to change it. At this point, I had already booked myself as much as I could at my job. I needed to pay this off. Explained to her that I was working as much as I could for the baby shower and that I was already booked that day. She said nope. She wanted me to move around my entire day, and she wanted me to move around all of my clients for that day. So I agreed to changing it. I made sure to explain to her that I would be extremely late to the baby shower, but that I would still be there. After that, we never spoke about it again. The day of the baby shower comes around, and I'm late. First thing I do is give Connie a hug. It was a super cold hug. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Connie's sister-in-law comes up to me and asks me why I'm late. I told her I had clients and that I had to stop by to see my mom. And she says, "Fuck your mom." I never met this woman, by the way. Connie said nothing. I felt so disrespected and hurt. I wanted to fight her, but because I'm a classy bitch, I didn't. Even helped clean up after the baby shower. Connie never said thank you. The only time Connie reached out was to tell me that she gave birth. Weeks later, I go to her socials only to see that she had blocked me on everything. I'm happy we're not friends anymore. I got pregnant right after that. Husband and I had the baby and we moved to another state. Now I'm pregnant for a second time. She still has me blocked. By the way, that baby shower was beautiful. Even her mom told me so. Self-care sister. My boyfriend asked me to pay for my birthday dinner. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I are nurses. We actually met in nursing school. He's 32, I'm 28. The story goes, we met in class. He was super charming, very good looking. He had the exact body type I liked. Muscular, but not super big. Has tattoos, blue eyes, tan skin, black hair. Basically could be Elvis. Every girl in our class had a crush on him. But I was getting chased by a bunch of the boys. He one day caught me staring at him in class. Then he came to talk to me and flirted with me. Right away, I told him I thought that he was cute, but that I would never date anybody from our class because I needed to focus. He agreed, but he wanted to become friends. We went out and had so much fun. 3 weeks later, he asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes. Thankfully, we were both very invested in our studies. We were both paying off our own school. We pretty much had the same schedule. Go to school in the morning and work from home at night. On the weekends, we would dedicate ourselves to studying. We were a well-oiled machine. At this point, he would pay for dinners. If we were going on a date, he'd usually pay for it. But every now and then, I would pick up the tab, or I would take him a coffee, or his favorite croissants. Things started changing when we moved in together. He asked me if we could discuss finances and I said yes. He asked me how much money I was earning and I was honest. On average, I was earning about $3,000 more than he was. This is when he suggested that I should be paying more rent because I earn more money. I told him I did not feel comfortable with that and that 50-50 should be it. We actually got into a fight about it 2 weeks later, so I threatened to move out. That's when he agreed to 50-50. So night of my birthday and I'm sitting at a table full of friends and family. It was a magical night. My parents got to meet my new boyfriend and we all had fun. Parents offered to pay for me, but my boyfriend said no, that he would. When we got home, he asked me to Venmo him my portion of my meal. What? It was my birthday. We consumed about $400 and then he said that I could definitely afford that. I got really angry and left. The next day I broke up with him and moved back in with my parents. He's begging me to come back, but I think he resents that I make more money than him. My overreacting self-care sister. I spent $700 on a flight to go see a man only to reject me after seeing me with no filter. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's that I'm on Instagram. You're gonna hate me even more by the time this ends. I'm gonna call this man Pee-wee. He lied about being 6'2", because when I met him, he was more like 5'7". So Pee-wee and I met on a dating app, because everybody meets on an app today. We messaged each other for about 4 hours. After that, he was completely obsessed. I gave him my Instagram, and after that, he started liking all of my pictures and videos. Now, I really don't post a lot, but what I do have on my page is very cute. And yes, I do use a filter every now and then. But in my defense, I did not use a filter in every single picture. In fact, a lot of my pictures are without makeup. But apparently, he didn't see any of those. After 3 days of DMing each other, he asked me if I wanted to come visit him. He lives very far away, which means I needed to be the one to fly over there. And why was I okay with this? Because I was delusional. When he suggested it, I thought he was going to pay for the ticket. But he said, let me know when you've booked your flight. So I thought, okay, maybe he'll pay for half of it later. But no, I booked my flight like the idiot I am, get myself on a plane, and the whole time we're still talking. After 8 hours of traveling to go see this man, I'm exhausted and hungry. He comes to pick me up, but when I see him, I knew right away he lied. He was not 6'2". He was like 5'7". After we hugged and said hi, Pee-wee started staring at my face. And let's just say he was not impressed. We got into Pee-wee's car, and that's when he said, "You look really different in real life." And he started asking me how old I really was. I had to show him my license to prove that I wasn't telling a lie. And that's when he said that he wasn't really feeling me, and that I could go back home if I wanted to. Excuse me? After 8 hours of traveling, he didn't even offer to take me to dinner. He didn't even ask me how I was. He just said, "You can go." I asked him to pay for the ticket, and he said he couldn't. On his Instagram, he presents himself as being rich. Called him out on not being 6'2", and he said that he didn't lie about that. Well, I got a hotel and stayed the weekend, and then I went home. I feel like an idiot. I would love to punish him, but I don't know how. Any ideas? Self-care sister.
Am I the asshole for cutting off my husband's long hair because he cheated on me with my twin sister? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. Here's a little backstory on the bitch that is my sister. Growing up, she resented the fact that she was a twin. She thought she wasn't special because there was somebody that looked just like her. Therefore, she would call me her mini-me, her replica, and her shadow. My parents would constantly tell her that she should appreciate me because we have a twin connection. Oh, but she hates having the twin connection. My sister was very popular and really into sports. Whereas I was also popular, but I was more into boys and writing songs and singing. She also hated me for the fact that boys preferred me. But she was always in sweaty gym clothes. Both ended up getting into relationships around the same time, except her boyfriend was a total dick and cheated on her. I actually helped her get out of that relationship, but of course she never said thank you. I, on the other hand, was proposed to by my boyfriend. She also hated this. Had 7 months to plan our wedding, and I knew I wanted to start an Instagram to document everything. 3 months into it, my Instagram blew up. And of course my sister hated this too. Started getting a bunch of hate comments. At first I didn't know what it was. It was weird. A few days later, I'm talking to a friend of mine, and she decides to tell me everything. My sister went ahead and created 5 fake accounts so she could bully me on Instagram. But of course, I didn't confront my sister. I felt bad for her because I knew that she was hurting. So I decided to give her a pass. Try and remember this part for later. My husband, on the other hand, I thought was a good guy. And we were boyfriend and girlfriend, and we saw each other twice a week. But really, it was only because he wanted to do you know what. And I thought that meant he loved me. He would take me out to dinner and sometimes do special things, but it was always followed by a favor, if you know what I mean. I accepted that this is just how relationships are, and that I shouldn't be prudish about it. After we got married, my husband started changing, and my God, women say this so often. He got an amazing job. He was making around $500,000 a year. He bought us a beautiful new house 2 blocks away from my parents, and I loved this because I was close to my family. He also bought me a new car, and get this, he offered to pay for a boob job, which I said no to. This is when my husband decided that he wanted to become a model on Instagram. He started getting together with local photographers, and all he would basically do was upload thirst traps. Now, yes, my husband is pretty attractive. He's muscular, tall, and has really long blonde hair. Now, this long blonde hair is his safety blanket. He loves his long hair. He talks about his long hair all the time, so much so that I've come to hate it. But his Instagram was not growing, whereas mine was blowing up. And I knew that he began to envy me this. He started saying things like, "My gosh, your content isn't that good. My pictures are better than yours." But like a good wife, I never said anything. This is when he started changing even more. He was asking for 3 meals a day, he wanted me to do his laundry, and he basically wanted me to serve him hand and foot. Without telling me all these things, he just started asking me to do it. There was no conversation. It was just a thing now. And I accepted it. I thought, well, he bought the house. He pays for the cars and the bills. I should be grateful and just serve him hand and foot. And then I started noticing other things. Anytime we would go to my parents' house, he would prioritize hanging out with my sister. At first, I appreciated it because I wanted them to get along. They were always together laughing and playfully punching each other. I thought it was cute. But then I noticed something really strange. But then I noticed my sister grabbing him. And when I tell you my sister is anti-affection, she hates touching people. But the way she touched him just made me realize that something was going on. My stomach fell so far down my ass, I thought it was gonna fall out. I had to act right then and there. I notice his phone is on the kitchen counter and I grab it. I go to Instagram and guess what I find? He was DMing with one of my sister's fake accounts that she created to bully me. While I'm standing behind them, I start going through all the messages. They had agreed to meet at our house where they did disgusting things. The way they were speaking to each other was like that of a couple. Without thinking, I grab the kitchen scissors and I walk up to him. And I chop off as much hair as I could. Then show the messages to them and my parents. My parents started fighting with my sister and yelling at her. That's when she decided to deny everything. She said that I couldn't prove the Instagram account was hers. And since he never used her name in the messages, she can deny it. But my husband didn't. He fessed up to the whole thing. I made him go to our house and pack up a bag. He ended up getting his own apartment. I'm keeping the house. Sister kept denying it, but guess what? She went to live with him in the apartment. He doesn't want to give me a divorce. Instead, he came to my house and tried to forcefully kiss me. Told me he was kicking my sister out. What should I do? Self-care sister out.
Disclaimer, this is not my story time. This is an update. I feel like you guys are going to come for me in the comments, but I needed to tell you guys. Within a couple of days, my twin sister moved in with him. After this, my parents basically disowned her. They stopped talking to her. Apparently, she called them and told them that she was going to move in with him and that they were going to try to have a life together. This is when my parents came over to my big ass house, which I took from my husband, and broke the news to me. My parents obviously felt so bad for me, but honestly, I wasn't surprised. I knew that my twin sister hated me. She would do anything, and I mean absolutely anything, to make me feel even worse. It's like pouring salt into a wound. But after about a week of living with my twin sister, my husband called me. Apparently, she was being a bitch to him. And of course, because that's her normal state of being. She's just mean. Essentially, he just asked me if he kicked her out, if I would let him move back into our house. I said, hell no. This is when he explained what really happened. We talked for about 3 hours and he spilled all the tea. And I know that this is coming from my husband, so I can't believe everything he says. But at the same time, I know my sister so well that I think he's probably telling the truth. Months ago, when we were at my parents' house, my sister and him started talking. And it was just like any other conversation. But he said one day my sister was acting strange. She paid more attention to him and she even started complimenting his looks. And like I said in part 1, my husband is pretty attractive. I mean, remember I told you guys he wanted to be a model? He's still trying, but he's not successful at it. But he got signed to a freaking modeling agency. And every time she would see him, she would just go out of her way to be really nice to him. And then the flirting started. She would say something cute to him, he would say something cute to her. He says, and I quote, "Because she's your twin, you guys look so much alike and it almost became like normal. Like I was talking to you." I mean, is that an excuse or is that psychology? I have no idea. Then he said one day they decided to go for coffee. And this is when my sister kissed him. Apparently she was the aggressor and he was trying to calm her down. But she just went for it. And because he's already kind of attracted to her because she looks like me, he kissed her. But my parents don't want to live with her, so they got her an apartment. And guess where she went to live? In the same building my husband is living in. Obsessed much? So my husband is on his best behavior. But let's see how long that lasts. But he's doing everything I've ever wanted him to do.
So I did it. I took him back. I know you guys are gonna hate me for this, but I do still love him and I am still attracted to him. Now he's worried that I'm gonna go cheat on him. So he's being super controlling. I caught him following me last night to the gym and back to the house. When I told him to stop, he told me that I was his and that I couldn't be with anybody else. You see, the thing is, he knows that I have options. There's about 2 guys at the gym that always hit on me. They're actually really good looking, but I'm not that kind of girl. Or should I be? But we decided to live separately. I guess I'll give you guys another update soon. Self-care sister out.
Am I the asshole for cutting off my stepmom for wearing white to my wedding? This is not my story time. I said, I mean, Instagram. My stepmom has always wanted me to think of her as my bestie. She's like a cool mom, you know? When my parents got divorced, it was pretty amicable. There was very little drama. And I appreciated that because my parents didn't want me to grow up in an environment where I had to choose between them. My mom remarried and I love my stepdad. He's like a second dad to me. He also has a lot of money, so he pays for everything. Father and my stepdad actually get along really, really well. They both paid for my wedding. 30 years old and I got married to my best friend. Planning of our wedding was seamless because I had a great wedding planner. And like I said, my husband's parents and my parents paid for everything. We had a healthy budget for the wedding. My stepmom early on wanted to get involved and she was trying to pick out really expensive things for the wedding. For the wedding, we actually didn't want to spend more than around $30,000. We wanted to spend more money on traveling for our honeymoon. But my stepmom started inviting herself to every single meeting I had with the wedding planner. My husband was very involved, so him and I basically chose everything together. Whenever my mom would come, she would try to come too. This is when she started trying to pick out the most expensive flowers, the most expensive cake, cake in flavors that we didn't even like, and then she would insist on us picking those things. Every single time she did something, I would complain to my mom. My mom would just subtly let her know that we weren't going to choose those things, that we were trying to stay within a small budget. That's when she started complaining that we should have a bigger budget. That seeing as how all of the parents were pitching in, our budget should be around $100,000. When she said this to me and my husband, we both looked at each other and laughed. We explained to her that instead of having a huge, ginormous wedding, we wanted to prioritize our honeymoon. We had planned to go island hopping in Greece and spend time in the south of France. And of course, we would prefer to stay in beautiful, luxurious hotels. So she said that we were being selfish, that we were going to deprive our families of the wedding that we all deserved, and that the wedding experience should be magical and huge, and that no expense should be spared. Couldn't believe that she was saying those things. She sounded so stupid. I walked straight to my dad and I explained to him that he needed to control her and ask her to please stay away. Dad told me that he couldn't do that because if he did, she would get upset. Every single time family is involved in any situation in any of these story times, someone's always going to get their feelings hurt, and that's why people don't speak up. Once my dad insisted on not telling her, I had to do it myself. I told her for the rest of the wedding planning, my husband and I would take care of everything. This is when she starts to cry. Dad finally opened his mouth and explained to her that it was just best for everyone. Then she tried to guilt trip me. She told me that her and I had been best friends for decades, which is so not true. She said she likes for me to think of her as my best friend. She's not my bestie. She stormed off, and then my dad made me go apologize to her, which I did. And this is the thing I regret the most. What she did next is so unbelievably rude. You're just gonna have to go to part 2. Am I the asshole for cutting off my stepmom for wearing white to my wedding? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Instead of me on Instagram. This is when I apologized for asking her to stay out of my wedding. This is the biggest mistake I made. This made her feel like she could do whatever she wanted. The good thing is she did stay out of the wedding planning, but the bad thing is that she actually succeeded in making me feel guilty. Even went as far as to tell my dad that I had never heard her this way before. For the rest of the wedding planning, whenever she knew that we were going to go meet with the planner, she would just mope around my dad's house and ask me what we decided on afterwards. Because I'm so nice, I actually decided to tell her what we were choosing. But of course, every single time I showed her something, she would start to criticize. At this point, my husband put his foot down and forbade me from showing her anything because he would see how I would react every time she told me something. Finally, the day of the wedding arrives. We landed on a beautiful cake. The venue was small, but it was so beautiful, and we had every single thing we ever wanted. The entire family came over to get ready with me. This is where all the drama started. I had one bridesmaid who wore lavender, and my mother who wore lavender as well. I told my stepmom that I would prefer her to wear lavender since she is my stepmom, but I told her she could pretty much wear any color she wanted. For the end of us getting ready, I noticed someone in white out of the corner of my eye. I was getting the final touches on my makeup, so I really couldn't open my eyes. I initially thought it was like somebody from the service. Then that's when I hear my mom gasp. I quickly open my eyes and see my stepmom standing in front of me, dressed in a full white gown. It didn't look like a wedding dress, but it was a gown. I guess to be more specific, it was cream colored. My dress was white, but with a hint of lavender. I couldn't help it, and I asked her, "Why are you wearing white?" She then looked around to the entire wedding party and said, "You told me I could wear whatever color I wanted." My mom could not help herself. I told her that everyone knows wearing white to a wedding is inappropriate. My stepmom told me that we were just reading too much into it. But I was clearly upset. I told my dad he had no idea that she was wearing white, so she obviously didn't tell him because he would have told her not to. Thankfully, the wedding was fun and everything went off without a hitch, but after the wedding, I completely cut her off. I sent her a message telling her that she crossed several lines and that there was no way I could have her in my life after this. My mom and even my dad agreed with this, and my dad basically told her that she needed to stand down. She's been texting me and calling me nonstop, and I just blocked her. Am I overreacting? Wedding pictures look great, except for the fact that my stepmom is in a white dress. My husband wants me to just get over it because it's family drama, but I think I should stand my ground. Self-care sister out.
After this big celebrity tells me to leave, I leave. But 2 hours later, he's asking me to go back to his hotel room. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. So I went back to his hotel room even though he was a little bit rude. I just couldn't give up the opportunity of dating a celebrity. I show up to his hotel room and he apologizes. He said that he has trust issues from all his past relationships. Then I pointed out to him that he had the hotel room ready to go and that it happened to be just by the bar we were at. He stays quiet and then he says, "I need you to sign this NDA. I read it and signed it, mostly because I just didn't want any trouble. Then he says, "Hey, I want to order dinner for us. What do you want to eat?" Then he said he wanted to wine and dine me. He said that he liked me, but the whole NDA thing really threw me off. We ended up watching a movie and then I go back to my place. The following day he calls me and asks me if I want to hang out again. We had lunch and then I told him I had to go home. He's been asking me out ever since. But I don't know. I kind of get a bad feeling from him. What do you guys think I should do? He is a celebrity.
I think my boyfriend is a narcissist. What should I do? Disclaimer, is not my story time. Instead of me on Instagram. Brace yourselves because this is one messed up story. 5 months ago, my bestie and I show up to this party. Think really rich people living in the Hamptons. A la Great Gatsby, but with TikTok and cell phones. My bestie and I look fabulous. Out of nowhere, this guy comes up to me and starts talking to me like he knew me. I was actually confused. I thought maybe we had met before and I was embarrassed that I didn't recognize him. So I entertained him for about 10 minutes. That's when he told me that he lied. That he'd never met me before, but he was pretending so that he could actually talk to me.
I was actually charmed. You see, he's English, and he was in town for about a week visiting his friends, the very rich people who were hosting the party. He charmed me so much that night. By the end of the party, he started love bombing me. No, I didn't know he was doing it at the time. He was giving me every single compliment he could think of. How pretty I was, how beautiful my hair was, how I was the prettiest girl in the entire party. They were very generic compliments. He still managed to charm me. That's when he said, "Can I kiss you?" I said no, and then he kissed me. I was stunned, but I kind of liked it. For the rest of that week, he started showing up everywhere I was. After about 2 weeks, he convinced me to be his girlfriend. But then he started making me feel bad for the people I was hanging out with. You see, I have a lot of guy friends, and he would say things like, "If you love me, you wouldn't be hanging out with all these guys." And the love bombing continued every single day, every hour of the day. He worshipped me. Before I knew it, I was prioritizing him and only him. I stopped hanging out with friends, and he started criticizing my appearance and changing the way that I was dressing. Then one day he told me that I was stupid for not realizing that he was lying to me all the time. When I asked him what he meant, he said, "Wow, then you really are stupid." 2 days later, I found out he's not even English. He's from Ohio. Everything he said is a lie. Then he love bombs me and follows it up with criticism. And when it comes to intimacy, it makes me feel like I'm not good enough, but then he always wants it. And last night he told me that he's more attractive than I am. And if that bothers me, can someone tell me what a narcissist actually is? I think I'm right about this. What should I do? Self-care sister out. I lost my boyfriend's dog and I don't know how to tell him. Am I an awful person for this? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Was sending me an Instagram. Please give this girl some legit advice. She is suffering right now. My boyfriend and I have been together for 3 months. It's a really new relationship. It's my first serious relationship. So far, I've done everything in my power to impress him in any way I can, including becoming the mother of his dog. Just moved out of his parents' house and he adopted this beautiful dog from a shelter. The puppy is rambunctious though. He will go crazy at anything. He gets super excited and likes to run around. So my boyfriend asked me if I could walk him every day since I work from home. We worked out a schedule. I'll sleep over at his house 3 days a week. When he goes off in the morning to work, I walk him once, then I get on my laptop and work, then at my lunch break, I'll take him out to walk again, and right before my boyfriend comes home, I'll take him out a third time. My boyfriend is really tired after he comes home, so the last thing I want him to do is be responsible for taking the puppy out. So last week, I took out the damn dog. It has been the bane of my existence ever since. I am suffering. I took him on a walk like we usually do. I didn't notice that his harness was not put on properly. This was my bad. But also, he just moves around so much when I'm putting it on him because he's so excited to go out. I took him outside and within 2 minutes of starting our walk, he literally just ran. I kept calling him and he ran. I chased him and he ran even more because he thought we were playing a game. You guys have no idea how much I was suffering. I was literally on my knees begging him to come back, crying my eyeballs out. That's when I pulled out my phone and lied to my boyfriend. I told him that he must have escaped through the dog flap. For an entire week, this dog was missing. His family and him were suffering. They even put out a $20,000 reward, but thankfully we found him a week later when a neighbor called and said they spotted him. And after 6 hours of driving around looking for him, we finally found him. Thank God he is totally safe. Now I want to tell my boyfriend the truth and I realize I lied to him. I feel like I can't retract on what I said. Did I tell him the truth or should I just let this go? I feel like a terrible girlfriend. Help me, please. I cheated on my husband 14 times with his best friend and other guys, and now I don't know what to do about it. This story is wild, so hold on. My husband and I have been married for 2 years. We're best friends, so we've had a really good relationship. We got married after 6 months of meeting each other. During that whole time, I met a lot of his friends, including his best friend. But he told me he had another best friend who was going to be traveling for a full year. One day, my husband tells me that all his friends are getting together to greet their best friend, the one who had been traveling for a full year. We show up to the party, and it turns out that this best friend is a woman. Not just any woman, but one that looks like she could model for Vogue. This woman was so good looking, I instantly got insecure. When her and my husband saw each other, they ran to each other's arms. Then I spent the entire night trying to be included in the conversation. Every time I would ask a question, she would answer it to my husband. She would never even look me in the face. Finally, I asked her if she had a problem and she said, "No, I'm sorry. I'm just really excited to see my best friend." When we got in the car, I told my husband I didn't like her. Then he said that he knew exactly what I was going to say. And he also said not to worry because I would never have to hang out with her. And that he would hang out with her without me, just to save me the trouble. Part 2 is up. I cheated on my husband 14 times with his best friend and other guys, and now I don't know what to do. That's when he told me that he would hang out with his girl best friend without me, so that he could save me the trouble of having to see her face. Then I asked him if he thought that she was more attractive than me, and that if he preferred to be with her than with me. He started to laugh and said no, and he felt offended that I would even ask him. So basically, he didn't even answer my question. Sometimes he would tell me that he would go hang out with her at bars. I would stay home and just literally cry the entire time. I would get sick to my stomach picturing my husband hanging out with this Vogue model. That's when I reached out to my husband's best friend and asked him what the deal with her was. And this man spilled all the tea. He told me that they had all been best friends since college, and that the Vogue model was basically in love with my husband the entire time they were in college. But my husband never paid attention to her. But then he told me that they ended up hooking up one night, and that after that my husband was hooked. But then she didn't want to be with him. Instead, they decided to stay best friends. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. Part 3 is up. I cheated on my husband 14 times with his best friend and other guys, and now I don't know what to do. After finding out that my husband had hooked up with his girl best friend who was really attractive, I vomited. Even though this was before I had met him, something told me that she was probably still in love with him. That's when my husband's guy best friend who had just told me everything invited me over to his house. And then the idea just came to me. I'm gonna start hooking up with whoever I want if my husband's gonna be doing it with his best friend. So I went over to this guy's house, we had a few drinks, and I hooked up with him. Did I regret it? Absolutely not. I felt liberated. It's like I had gotten revenge on my husband. So after that, I went on a rampage. I tried to hook up with as many of his friends as possible. Exactly 6 guys. Then I looked for the guys that I liked in college, and I hooked up with a bunch of them too. In total, 14. This all happened in a month. But now my husband told me that his best friend, the girl that I thought he was hooking up with, is pregnant from another guy and that they're getting married. And that the whole time she was away traveling for a year, she was with this man. Now I feel like a total asshole. What should I do? I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I met a little over a year ago. We actually met on vacation and we happened to live in the same city, so we decided to go on a date when we got back. 2 months later, we got engaged. My family was completely against it though. My parents thought it was way too quick for us to get married. But here's the thing, I'm 32 and I was desperate at that point for somebody to just ask me to marry them. And looking back, that was completely wrong of me. My parents were so against it that when they met my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, they told him that we should just date a little bit longer before we even decided to get engaged. But of course, eventually we made the decision on our own and my parents just had to deal with it. By the time we had gotten engaged, I had only met his mom. His dad traveled a lot for work, so he was pretty much never home. So here's a little backstory on my husband. He was born in the same city I was, and his parents had him when they were 14 and 15. They were incredibly young. So his parents were more like his friends. They had so much fun and hung out together. It was always a really good time. We decided to have an engagement party, and that's when I met his dad. And it was infatuation at first sight. Part 2 is up. I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. I decided to start flirting with him a little bit more. I kind of wanted to see what he would say. My parents-in-law invited me and my husband over to their house for barbecue. So I decided to wear a thong bikini. My father-in-law was grilling in the backyard and my mother-in-law was inside making a salad. So of course, I took off all my clothes and I pranced around the pool in my thong bikini. I positioned myself perfectly so that my father-in-law had a great view of my ass. I also went up to him and started talking. I would touch his shoulder every now and then. That's when he said, "If I didn't know any better, I would think that you're flirting with me." Then he smiled. I almost died. I laughed with him too, and then my stupid husband came outside. That was 2 days ago. You guys tell me, but in my opinion, it sounded like he was liking it. For the rest of the barbecue, every time I would turn to look at him, he was always looking at me, so I knew it was working. But now I'm like, what's the goal? Do I really want to ruin my relationship with my husband and ruin his parents' relationship? Or do you think we can keep it on the down low? What should I do? My husband refused to touch me on our wedding night and says that it's my fault. Our wedding was only 2 weeks ago, and to this day, he still has not touched me. Here's the thing, we had an arranged marriage. My family is extremely traditional, and where we come from, it's normal to have arranged marriages. When I was 12 years old, my parents told me who I was going to end up marrying. This all seemed very normal to me growing up because I saw my sisters and cousins doing it. But now that I'm in this, I realize how terrible it is. My now husband didn't actually grow up in the same country I did. In fact, we had only met a week before the actual wedding. I had a really bad feeling a month before the wedding though. So I told my parents I did not want to marry him. That's when they told me that if I didn't go through with the marriage, they would disown me. I would have nowhere to live, no money, and no family. So, of course, I agreed to marry him. A week before the wedding, my parents hosted a dinner for his family and mine. When he came in through the door, I was happy to see that he was actually attractive, but he didn't look at me once throughout the whole night. Part 2 is up. My new husband refused to touch me on our wedding night and says it's all my fault. We finally met a week before the wedding. When he came in through the door, I was so happy to see that he was actually attractive. But this man barely looked at me the entire night. Parents presented us to each other and he glanced at me. That was it. He was extremely cold and basically didn't speak to any member of my family. The only person he did speak to was my father, of course. I spent the entire dinner trying to make eye contact with him, but not once did it happen. Thankfully, the dinner only lasted about 2 hours and his parents and him left. As soon as they did, I burst into tears. Also, I know I'm a beautiful girl. I've had many suitors come to my house and ask my parents for my hand in marriage. They had agreed to this arranged marriage so long ago that it never even gave any other guys a chance. The worst part is that one of the guys that asked to marry me a few years ago, he and I went to the same school, got along, and dare I say liked each other. At least he would look me in the face. I told my parents that he didn't even look at me once. My dad said that I was completely overreacting, but my mother agreed with me, thank God. She told my dad that my fiance's behavior was completely unacceptable, and that the least he could have done was at least said hello to me. My mom was also upset that he didn't even say hello to her, and that he was openly disrespecting our family. I tried to convince my dad to cancel the marriage, but he said no. Part 3 is up. My husband refused to touch me on our wedding night and blamed it all on me. He refused to look at me on our wedding day. He didn't even kiss me once. The only time he touched me that night was when the photographer asked us to hold hands for a picture. And even then, the way he grabbed my hand was so cold. When it came time for us to go to our room, I was already very upset. He could tell. We got into the room and I went straight to the shower. I took off my dress, showered, and came out. And when I did, he pretended to be asleep. That's when I grabbed him and turned him around. I asked him why he wouldn't touch me or even look at me. That if he didn't want to marry me, he shouldn't have. That's when he told me that he never really wanted to marry me because he had heard things about me. He said that we had some mutual friends, but he refuses to tell me who these friends are. He claims they told him that I had a secret boyfriend and that I had dated many men, which couldn't be further from the truth. First off, my parents are super strict. The only time I was unchaperoned was in school. And he said, "It's your fault, I will never touch you." I started to cry and I called my parents. I literally ran away from him. Told my parents what he said and thankfully they were on my side. My father says the marriage is void if he refuses to have children with me. But guess what? I started doing some digging and I found out that he was the one seeing other women and men. What should I do? Story time about how my husband died and his best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My husband and I were married for almost a decade. During that time, we had 2 kids. And of course, his passing was completely devastating to our families. And 2 weeks after my husband died, I was still grieving. But his best friend started coming around our house a lot. First, he was very emotional. Him and my husband were best friends for about 7 years. They saw each other almost every day. Not only did they work together, but they also would go to the gym together and pretty much hang out all the time. So I know this guy really well. When my husband would invite him over, I never got the feeling that he liked me. I mean, sure, sometimes I caught him staring at me, but I'm beautiful, so I understand. So after my husband passed, he started coming over as in, "I want to take care of you," and we would just kind of cry together. I took this as his way of trying to help my husband, so I just thought he was being really sweet. But exactly 1 month after my husband passed away, he started asking me weird questions. Number 1, do you want to start dating again? Number 2, don't you feel lonely at night? Number 3, you're still so young and beautiful. You need to give yourself a chance with someone else. Mind you, I'm still grieving. To these questions, I would usually say no. Obviously, why would I even be thinking about those things? I didn't put too much mind to the questions, but a few days later, he came over after he had been at a bar. As soon as I opened the door to him, he said, "Can I kiss you?" And then he did without me saying yes. Part 2 is story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. As soon as I opened the door, he asked me if he could kiss me and I didn't say anything. And he grabbed me and just started kissing me. Of course, I pushed him away and told him that he needed to leave. That's when he said, "But you didn't say no." I told him I didn't say anything because I was shocked he would even ask me that. That's when he walked into the house without me inviting him, went straight to the fridge and opened up a beer. Then he starts yelling at me for giving him mixed signals. He says that since my husband died, all I've been doing is flirting with him. Since when is grieving flirting? I told him that he was completely wrong and that he needed to leave again. Then he said, "No, I'm not leaving here until you tell me the truth." That I was secretly in love with him and that I actually wanted to be with him. No, this wasn't funny to me at all. He was slurring his words and barely could stand up. I knew my kids were upstairs, so all I wanted to do was get him out of the house. That's when I grabbed my phone and started texting one of my other husband's best friends. I texted him 911, "Please come to our house now." He responded right away saying, "I'm coming over." After another minute of this guy ranting at me, I told him I was sorry for giving him mixed signals and that was never my intention, blah blah blah. Then he asked me out on a date. He said that he wanted to take me out and show me a good time. I said no, and I asked him to leave again, but he wouldn't. Finally, someone knocks on the door. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. That's when he asked me out on a date and started walking closer to me. Finally, someone knocked on the door, and it was my other husband's friend who I texted to come help me. I ran over to the door quickly and I opened it. That's when my husband's best friend, who was drunk in my house asking me out on a date, forcing me to kiss him, tells the other guy that he needs to leave. So I asked the other friend if he could just take this guy home. He said, "Yeah, of course." And he told him, "You're drunk. I'm gonna take you home now." They left together without incident and I was really relieved. But after that, I knew to watch my back now. So here's what happened. He started texting me every now and then asking me if I wanted to go to dinner, and I would not even respond to him. And after that, he started showing up to different places I was at. For example, I go to Pilates classes 5 times a week. This place is near my house, and one day he just showed up trying to take a class. As soon as I saw him, I told the instructor and they kicked him out. That's when he came back and said that he did nothing wrong and that he deserved to be in the class too. He even paid the year up front, so they had no choice but to let him in. Instead, I left. Then he followed me outside to the parking lot and told me that I needed to relax. Said, "It's not like I'm following you," which he clearly was. I got in my car and left. That very same night, he sent me a message apologizing for acting crazy. Then he told me that all he wanted was just to be close to me and the kids. By the way, my kids really do love him. They ask about him all the time since he stopped coming over, and I don't even know what to tell them. After a few weeks of him not acting crazy, he asked me if he could come over and I said yes. Decided to invite all my husband's friends and we had a nice dinner. But again, this guy asked me out. I said no, but my best friend thinks I should give him a shot. He's good looking and rich. What do you guys think? A very well-known influencer who is hooking up with a famous football player who has a wife and kids. Am I the asshole? Claimers is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. Instagram. Lost my job in early 2020, obviously due to COVID. Instead of looking for another job, I set my mind to becoming famous on social media. Knew that I could make it happen, but I didn't know how yet. I did some research, so I basically started copying everything everybody else did, like all the other famous influencers. I dabbled in fashion, makeup, lots of lifestyle content, but finally I landed on bikini content. This just put me on a new level. I started gaining tons of followers. After posting every single day for about 6 months, I was almost at 400,000. This is when all the DMs started rolling in. I had really famous rappers, actors, athletes, comedians, other influencers, big YouTubers. I mean, the list goes on and on. So of course, I would reply to all of their DMs. Some offered to fly me out to see them, and others were living in the same city that I was. So I basically started going out on dates. The first date I ever went on was with a rapper. I don't want to give too many details because I think you guys could guess who this is. He was very popular in 2010s. I mean, he's still popular now, but he made a lot of good music then. Anyway, he had me come over to his house, spent the night at his house, and we basically talked the entire night. Surprisingly, we had really good conversations, and that was that. And I got a DM from a really big football player, who I knew was already married and had kids. That didn't stop me from messaging him back. Part 2 is up. I'm a well-known influencer who's hooking up with a famous football player who's married and has kids. Am I the asshole? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. When I saw his DM, I quickly answered. Sent me little heart eyes. So I replied back with some hearts. Then he asked me where I lived. I told him that I was in LA, and he said, okay, cool. I can fly you out. I said, sure. Actually, the next day, I was flying first class to go see this guy. Got me a suite at a really nice hotel. He said he would show up at 7, but he actually showed up at 11 p.m. By this point, I was already in my pajamas and my skincare. Once he came up to the room, he apologized for being so late. That's when he said that he liked that I wasn't wearing makeup. Which makes me laugh so much because before he arrived, I had a full face of makeup on and a freaking cocktail dress and heels. He said that I was a natural beauty. That's when he basically ordered the entire menu from the hotel. He ordered steak, pasta, pancakes, waffles, French toast, champagne, and a bunch of other stuff. He asked me if I wanted a salad. I said yes. While we were waiting for the food, he started kissing me and we basically ended up doing it. It happened really quick. It was over in like 2 minutes. Afterward, he kissed me and then the food came. He proceeded to eat almost everything that he ordered, but he left me some salad and fries. That was it. It's like he was telling me that he only wanted me to eat salad. After that, he started asking me questions like if I was dating other people. Said no, but I was going on dates. When he told me that he only wanted me to be exclusive with him, that he would fly me out whenever he was available. I said yes, but I knew that I wasn't going to go through with that. I'm a well-known influencer who's hooking up with a famous football player who has a wife and kids. Am I the asshole? Claimers are not my story time. Sending me on Instagram. That's when he told me he wanted me to be exclusive with him, that he would basically fly me out whenever he wanted. Obviously said yes to his face, but I was not planning on it. Would I be flying around the country to go see this one guy? Good news is when I got back home, I had a bunch of new DMs. So I went on a few more dates. I went on a date with a very famous YouTuber. It was super fun, really casual, and didn't really expect anything from me, which was really nice. When we went on our date, he actually treated me like a queen. If this guy asked me to be his girlfriend, I would totally say yes in a heartbeat. Then the football player actually ended up calling me the same night that I was on the date with the YouTuber. Decided to go to the bathroom and answer the phone. That's when he started acting all jealous and asked me where I was. He said that I should be home resting and ready to go see him again. He asked me if I could fly out the next day. I said no because I did have a modeling job, thank God. I mean, a girl needs to make money. Then he said that he would start giving me an allowance of $5,000 a month. I said yes to in a heartbeat. So I ended up canceling the modeling job. I flew out the next day to go see him and he actually gave me the $5,000. Said that every time I saw him, he would give me more. Here's the thing, he has a wife and kids and I do feel bad about that. This has been happening now for a few months. I have more money now than I ever had. And I'm still modeling on the side, so I'm making my own money. I'm still going out on dates with other guys. What should I do? Story time about how I've never farted in front of my boyfriend and can't even poop if he's in my house, which led me to pooping in my car by mistake. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for 3 months. We are so in love and we met through a dating app. He even moved into my apartment. I know some might say it's quick, but it's just meant to be. We are so in love. We get along super well. We're so attracted to each other. Our sexy time is like amazing, like the best I have ever had. And I was the one that asked him to move in with me and he said yes right away. I actually thought he was going to say no, but he was so down for it that I was so happy. Before he moved in, he actually would come over to my house all the time. And he started farting in front of me. It was cute, funny, whatever. But I can't bring myself to doing it in front of him. I can't even poo when he's in my apartment, much less could I poo when I was at his. So I found myself having to hold it in all day long. Anytime we would go to a restaurant, I would try to go, but sometimes I just couldn't go because I knew that he was there. It's all become very complicated. Now that he moved into my place, we love watching movies. So we were sitting on the couch watching a movie, and suddenly I felt the urge to go to the bathroom. There was no way I was going to go poop while he was there. Out of nowhere, I jump up and tell him that I have to go out. I get in my car, part 2 is up. Story time about how I can't fart in front of my boyfriend or even poop when he's in the same place as me, which caused me to poo in my car by mistake. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. Out of nowhere, I jump off the couch and tell him I have to go to the supermarket. He offers to go for me and I said no. But in hindsight, I should have said, yeah, sure, you go, so that I could stay alone in the apartment by myself and go poo. I grab my keys and jump in the car. And then suddenly, I start pooping. I couldn't control myself. I couldn't believe it was happening right then and there. I stopped the car and pulled over and just pooped pooped in my car. Luckily, I was wearing baggy pants, so you couldn't really notice it. Suddenly, I remembered I had an extra change of clothes in my car. I looked behind me, and there it was, a pair of jeans. I take off my sweatpants and try to wipe myself as best as I could. And I actually went to a CVS, went into the bathroom, cleaned myself. I even bought baby wipes. Oh my god. I changed into the jeans, and I got back in the car and went home. When I get home, my boyfriend says, "Did you just change?" Then I told him I ripped my pants somehow in the grocery store. And then he said, "You didn't bring anything back from the grocery store." And I didn't know what to say. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I can't fart in front of my boyfriend and this caused me to poop in my car by mistake. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I was on my Instagram. I told him that I had ripped my pants, so I changed into other pants. And then he asked, "But you didn't bring anything back from the supermarket." And I said, "Oh yeah, you're right." Then I told him that I went to CVS instead because I needed baby wipes, which I actually did buy them, so I showed them to him. But let's remember, I had just pooped on myself, so I really wanted to take a shower. So I tell him, "Hey babe, I'm actually gonna take a shower because I just got my period." Then he says, "But you just had your period last week." I just kept digging a bigger and bigger grave. Then he sits me down and says, "What's going on?" I just couldn't lie anymore. And I told him the truth, that I had pooped in the car because I didn't want to poop in the apartment because he was there. That's when he started laughing maniacally and told me that I was being so stupid. To this day, I still can't fart in front of my boyfriend. And I still can't go to the bathroom. I'm not sure how to fix this or how to even go about actually doing it for the first time. So maybe you guys have some ideas. Also, never going back to that CVS because I'm pretty sure I didn't put the pants in the trash and they were just lying on the floor and they saw me go in. What should I do?
I'm being accused of rape and I don't know if I actually did it. Am I the asshole? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. This all started 2 years ago at a party. 2 years ago, my friends called me up and told me they had a party to go to. Ironically, I did not want to go to this party. I felt really tired from work and I just wanted the night off to chill. That's until my friend called me and told me that the girl that I liked would be at the party. Here's a little backstory on the girl and me. Her and I met through mutual friends, and from the moment that I met her, I really liked her. The night I met her, I asked her out and she said no. So I left it at that. Of course, my feelings didn't change for her. I still liked her. Anytime I would see her at parties or friends' houses, we would always chat. I never asked her out again, but she could clearly tell that I still liked her. I had a bad habit of staring at her. So when my friend told me that she'd be at the party, I decided to go. As soon as we got to the party, I saw that she was talking to this one guy. Now I have to confess, it made me really angry. This is when I decided to have a few beers. Now here's when things start going bad. I'm starting to get tipsy and my friends start telling me to go talk to her. I said no, but they insisted. Instead of sticking to my guns, I decided to do what my friends wanted me to do. I walked up to this girl, not even saying hello, and I said, "Are you dating this guy?" While this guy is standing right next to us. That's when she pushes me aside and says, "It's none of your business." Part 2 is I'm being accused of rape and I don't know if I actually did it. Am I the asshole? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. That's when she pushes me to the side and tells me it's none of my business. That's when the guy that was standing next to her tells me to leave. So I did. I walked back to my friends completely defeated and embarrassed. I felt humiliated. Almost 5 minutes later, she comes up to me and apologizes. She said, "I'm sorry I pushed you." I told her it was okay and if we could just talk. We went to the backyard and I asked her why she wasn't interested in me. That's when she told me that she had been in an abusive relationship and she wasn't looking for anything else. I told her that I wasn't looking for a relationship either and that I just really liked her. Basically, I just wanted to hang out with her. She said she wanted to stay away from guys for now, and I said why. And that's when she kissed me. I was completely shocked. I was not expecting that. Now I could tell that she had been drinking too because she was a little tipsy, so I kissed her back. I could hear my friends cheering in the background. They're such idiots. So I asked her if she wanted to go somewhere more private. We ended up going to one of the bedrooms in the house, and we kept on kissing. At this point, she did not say no. It felt like she wanted it just as much as I did, and we went for it. And to be honest, it only lasted about a minute. After we finished, we kissed and we went back to the party. She held my hand for the rest of the night. In my eyes, things had gone pretty good. But then my worst nightmare began. Part 3 is up. I'm being accused of rape and I don't know if I actually did it. Am I the asshole? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. After we did the deed, she held my hand for the rest of the night. And there were witnesses to her kissing me and holding my hand that night. A few moments later, she completely disappeared. I didn't see her at all for the next 3 days. I decided to call her the next day, but she did not answer her phone. I also sent her messages, but she didn't text back. 4 days later, I get a knock on my door, and it's her dad. And that's when he told me that his daughter was accusing me of rape. I was in complete shock when he said that. Then he asked me what my version was. I told him exactly what happened and he said that she probably said no and I kept going. I told him that at no point did she say no and that people had seen us kissing and holding hands throughout the night. Then he said I took advantage of her being drunk, but she wasn't even that drunk. He also said she was probably so drunk that she didn't even realize she was holding my hand. Here's the thing. After he left, I sat down and started thinking about the entire night. And I really started thinking back. Did she say no? Did she tell me to stop? I was drunk at the time, but I swear to God she didn't, or at least I didn't hear her say it. Body language wasn't saying stop. Here's the thing. My parents have a lot of money. Now they're asking my parents to just give them lots of money and that they'll drop everything. My parents are just gonna pay them the money. What should I do?
Should I break up with my girlfriend for sending her nudes to my brother? Disclaimer, is not my story time. I sent them on Instagram. I'm a 25-year-old guy and my brother is 23. We have always had a really good relationship. We're really close. We play sports together. We just spend a lot of time together in general. My girlfriend and I have only known each other for a year. We started dating 2 months later, so we've been together for about 7 to 8 months. To be honest, I don't exactly know how long. Am I the perfect man? No. Are we the perfect couple? No. But you know what? I put a lot of effort into our relationship. For example, she gets really bad mood swings when she has her period. So I always make the effort to go buy her groceries, I fill up her car with gas, and on her first day of her period, I always go over to her apartment and make her a nice meal. And I always buy her favorite vegan cupcakes from Whole Foods. Sure, I always forget about our anniversary and stuff like that, but it's the big things that count, you know? So my girlfriend always jokes about how cute my brother is. I mean, is it really cute? I don't know. He's just my brother. She'll go out of her way to make comments about him. Now, I'm not a jealous guy, so I never really say anything. She did make a comment in front of my brother and it made him uncomfortable. So afterwards, I asked her not to say those things in front of my brother. And if you must know, go to part 2 to see what she said about my brother. Should I break up with my girlfriend for sending her nudes to my brother? Disclaimer, isn't on my story time. I said on Instagram. While we're sitting at dinner with my parents, she says, "Your brother is hot AF." My brother looks up from his dinner plate and just stares at me. My mom laughed awkwardly, and my dad literally didn't know what she was talking about. I could see how uncomfortable it made my brother. So after the dinner, I asked my girlfriend to not make any comments about how good looking my brother is. But then her weird obsession with my brother just got worse. He and I are both really into fitness and usually go to the gym together. And she started coming to the gym with us. Except she would follow my brother around like a lost puppy at the gym. Again, my brother would just turn to look at me and be like, "Can you come grab her?" So I physically had to pull her away from my brother. After a couple of times of us going to the gym and this happening, I sat her down and told her that she really needed to stop this time. Honestly, at this point, I found it kind of funny. My girlfriend's also really funny, so she makes everything into a joke. So honestly, I didn't assume anything terrible about it. Not until a few weeks ago when everything went down. Brother started dating a new girl. He showed my girlfriend a picture of her. My girlfriend immediately started judging her by her looks. She pretty much said she was ugly and that she had really bad skin. And that my brother could do a lot better. Part 3 is should I break up with my girlfriend for sending her nudes to my brother? Disclaimer, is not my story time. I sent them on Instagram. After my girlfriend started ripping into my brother's new girlfriend, I put my foot down and told her that she needed to stop immediately. My brother was clearly uncomfortable, and still she thought it was all a funny joke. As I drove her home, I asked her why she had to do that. She went on a rant about how hot my brother was and how ugly his new girlfriend was. Then again, she started criticizing everything about her physically. Said her hair was dry, that she had too many pimples, that she was shaped like a little boy. That's when I told her that she didn't need to say everything she thought. Once I dropped her off at her place, I decided to go to the gym. 5 seconds after stepping into the gym, my brother sends me a screenshot of 2 nudes my girlfriend sent him. Call my brother and he says, "Dude, WTF." Then I call my girlfriend and she says, "What's up?" Enter the screenshot and she said, "Oh my god, I must have sent that by mistake. I'm so sorry." And I said, "Why would you send that by mistake?" She came up with this whole story about how she was actually trying to send them to me. And she sent me a screenshot of her messages. And she said that she probably just clicked on his by mistake. I don't believe it. I basically ghosted her for an entire week. My brother's still pretty pissed off. She's begging me to come back to her, but I don't know what to do. Could she be telling the truth?
Story time about how my best friend and I beat up my husband after he hit me. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My husband and I have always had a really toxic relationship. He's always been extremely jealous and controlling. We've been together for 2 years. And within those 2 years, he's managed to separate me from all of my friends and my family. I still keep in contact with my family secretly whenever he's not around. I usually call my mom as soon as he leaves the house and I talk to her for about an hour. But my husband somehow always finds out when I'm talking to my mom. Sometimes I even think that he put cameras in our house so that he could watch me when he's not home. I usually work from home, so I'm always in my house. And he loves it that way. Even if I want to go to the supermarket, I have to call him and ask him for permission. But my best friend has always stuck by me. She comes over unannounced just to check up on me, and my husband hates her. He even told her one time that she needed to stay away from our house. But of course, she didn't listen to him. My husband has gotten physical with me in the past, but never as bad as this last time. Got into an altercation because I wanted to go out with my best friend. We just wanted to have a simple dinner, but he didn't want me to go. But I decided to dress up and I left the house. As I was leaving the house, he grabbed me and slapped me. Best friend was outside, came in, and she started punching him. So I started punching him too. I went to my parents' house and I've been staying there since. But my husband keeps wanting me to come back. What should I do?
Story time about how a strange man abused me because I didn't want to give him my phone number. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I'm a 34-year-old mother of 2. I'm also a single mom, but I do own my own bakery. Most days I work from home, but I do go to the bakery every single day to open and close. I usually have about 4 employees at the bakery at once because we get really busy. On this occasion, one of my workers called out sick, so I decided to step in for her. I dropped my kids off at school and then I went straight to the bakery. Let me just fill you guys in on what I was wearing. I had on a matching set of activewear. So blue leggings and a blue top, which covered my stomach. In other words, I wasn't showing a lot of skin. When I get to the bakery, I see a man sitting in the corner. He had purchased his food and he was eating. I had a quick chat with all my employees asking them how the day was going, and they told me that the man had kept staring at them the entire time. And I look at the guy and sure enough, he is staring at all of us. I asked them to just ignore him. but this was a huge mistake. After a few minutes, the man came back up to the counter. He asked me for a sandwich and I gave it to him. He paid and went back to sit down, but then kept staring at me the entire time and at my other female employees. Part 2 is up. Story time about how a strange man abused me because I didn't want to give him my phone number. Disclaimer, is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. The guy just kept staring at me and my employees. After a bit, I asked him if he was okay and if he wanted something else. Obviously, he said no and just kept sitting at the table. But again, he kept staring at my employees and at me. This obviously made us uncomfortable, so I decided to do something about it. I decided that the best thing would be to just close the store. I go to the man and tell him that we were going to close and if he needed anything else to buy it now. Then he says, actually, I would like to talk to you. And I said, sure, what's up? Honestly, I thought he was going to ask for a job, but no. He starts complimenting my hair, my body, and told me that I was too beautiful to be working there. That's when I told him that I was actually the owner of the bakery. And he says, wow, that's even more impressive. Let me describe this man. He was actually okay looking, mid-20s, and dressed pretty well. He just looked like a normal guy. Then he asked me to sit down at the table. I said no. That's when he told me that he'd been coming to my bakery for a week and that he'd been watching me. Then he grabbed my hand and pulled me down to sit next to him. Then he proceeds to put his hand on my lap. Creepy. Part 3 is up. Story time about how a strange man abused me because I did not want to give him my phone number. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I sent him on Instagram. That's when he slid his hand onto my lap. Quickly get up from the table and ask him to leave. That's when he said, why are you freaking out? I'm just trying to get your number. Then I told him that there was absolutely zero chance I would ever give him my phone number. And he said, oh, you think you have a choice? And he holds out his phone so that I could type in my number. I pushed his phone back and again asked him to leave. He threatened me and said that he wouldn't leave until I gave him my number. My knees and hands were shaking. Look back at my employees behind the counter and they are scared. That's when one of my employees says, I'm gonna call the cops. And I said, yes, call them. As soon as I turned back to this man, he swings at me. He wasn't able to reach my face, but then he grabbed me by the shoulders and pushed me down onto the ground. This all happened in about 30 seconds. As I'm on the ground, he starts slapping me. I covered my face with my arms and I just started kicking at him. And my two female employees, who by the way are like 17 and 18, start attacking the guy. And then he starts hitting them. Thankfully, 2 men from the street hear me yelling. I came in and tackled him and the police arrived 2 minutes later. I found out this guy was stalking me for a month. I got a restraining order. Be careful out there.
Rating celebs I met in New York, part 2. So I met the beautiful Natalie Portman while working at Rosa Mexicano right across the street from Lincoln Center in New York City. She came in with a really big party, so I had 2 other servers helping me because there were lots of kids at the table. She is vegan. I knew it at the time, so I was really excited to serve her because I'm vegan as well. So I recommended my favorite vegan dish from the restaurant and she was really grateful and she said please and thank you for everything. She left a really generous tip and she was just very kind to all of the servers and all of the help. So I love her. This is a really embarrassing one. So I met them at a screening of their movie Steve Jobs. I'm an actress, so I get invited to those sometimes, like a screening, not a premiere. They were both on their way out of the movie and then I said, can I take a picture with you guys? She said yes. He said no. I didn't hear him the first time, so I asked again, and on the second time he replied, no, I don't want to take a picture. I thought it was really rude and I was brokenhearted because I'm totally in love with him. And then she said yes, so she took a picture with me and she just said, don't worry, he's just in a bad mood. And then I apologized because I was like, now I seem like a really annoying fan, so I'm so sorry. And he left. Rating celebs I met while working in LA, part 2. Let's go. So first up is Kylie Jenner, the queen of Instagram herself. This was at a beauty event where I was hired to model a product. She was there with her friends and it was also a big influencer's birthday. So it was like beauty event / birthday for someone and they were at a really massive table. Kylie was towards the middle of the table with 2 people beside her that I think were her friends. I don't know who they were. And Kylie basically took selfies and videos of herself the entire time and then left early-ish on, and I could tell that the other influencers were definitely intimidated by her, so I give her a 5 out of 10 because she could have been a little bit nicer and more talkative towards everyone else. So Next is the beautiful Amanda Cerny. At the time, I had literally no idea who she was. I went to her house with a friend who took me there, and she let me into her house. She was so kind. I was cold, so she gave me a blanket. We talked about veganism. Her boyfriend, my friend, and I and her watched The Office, and she was just so kind and so beautiful. And until then, I didn't realize who she was.
Okay, literally most embarrassing story of my life. I started acting and modeling when I was 8, so I should have some experience, right? So I was taking a speech class in college and I had to write an essay about what I saw myself doing within the next 5 years. And because I am an annoying overachiever, I wrote an entire essay about how successful I would be as an actress. Guess what I wrote? I said that by the age of 22, I would have won a Grammy. A Grammy? I didn't even know what a Grammy was. Like, my dumbass didn't even know that Grammys were for singers. So the kid I had a crush on actually pipes up and says, "Don't you mean an Oscar? Grammys are for singers?" And I said, "No, I mean a Grammy." I had the audacity to try and correct the kid.
Is it normal that my father still hits me even as an adult? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. When I was a kid and I got in trouble, my dad would hit me. I always knew to expect it, so it wasn't a really big deal. But of course, I would do my best to stay out of trouble. Sometimes he would use a belt and sometimes he would slap me across the face. The slapping was the worst part. From the ages of 10 to 12, I didn't really get hit because I never got in trouble. When I turned 14, things started getting rough. I wanted to date boys and my dad was not having it. So his form of punishment sometimes was even taking food away from me. This happened on 2 occasions when I was 14 and I almost ran away because of it. I know most of you are thinking that my mom should have stepped in, but my mom was pretty afraid of my dad too. Sometimes I feel like my parents have brainwashed me into thinking that what my dad is doing is fine. The sad part is that I'm now 20 and my dad still hits me from time to time. I do have to say my father has always been there for me. He's provided me with a great life and a good education. And it's not like he would just hit me out of nowhere. It was only when I got in trouble and for specific reasons. But I do think he needs to stop it because I'm 20 now. Here's where things get really messy. I just got engaged and my fiance hates my father. Follow for part 2. Is it normal that my father still hits me as an adult? Now that I'm 20 and engaged, I told my fiance about what my father did. Like I said, my father wouldn't just hit me out of nowhere. He would only do it when he was punishing me and for specific reasons. But my fiance loathes my father. He thinks it's abuse and that it wasn't a normal thing for me to have to endure as a child, especially as an adult. And I've only come to realize that what my dad is doing is probably wrong because of my fiance. Before that, I never had anybody in my life tell me that what my dad was doing was wrong. But here's what happened. My fiance and I were cooking in my parents' kitchen. My dad must have been in a really bad mood because he comes into the kitchen and says, "If you don't clean up this mess, I'm gonna show your fiance how I slap the shit out of you." My father had never shown that side of him in front of my fiance. But as soon as those words came out of my father's mouth, my fiance turned to him and said, "You will never put your hands on her again." And my dad said, "That's my daughter and I can do whatever I want." My fiance asked me to leave with him and I did. My mom called us and begged us to come back, but my fiance said no. Part 3 is it normal that my father still hits me as an adult? After my fiance stood up to my dad, we didn't speak to my family for about 2 months. That's when my fiance asked me to go to therapy. And I did. That's when I found out that what I really needed to do was fix my relationship with my father. Because he had always punished me physically, I held a lot of resentment towards him. And my father being very antiquated, he thought that he was doing the right thing. Now let me clear a few things up. He only hit me twice when I was an adult. Once when I was 19, I got a bad grade in one of my classes and he flipped out. He slapped me across the face and told me that that would teach me to do better. The second time was right after my 20th birthday. I had gotten into an argument with my mom that really wasn't such a big deal. My mom and I worked things out, but my dad thought it was inappropriate that I spoke to my mom like that. Was I very disrespectful? No. But to him, it was completely unacceptable. So he hit me once with his belt. My fiance is refusing to invite my parents to our wedding, and to be honest, I kind of agree with him. Ever since stepping away from my parents, I have so much more confidence. I'm also happier in my relationship because I'm getting to be myself, and I'm not afraid that anyone will punish me. But I do feel guilty. I want to reach out to my parents. I'm not sure. What should I do?
My ex-bestie tried to kidnap me because I told her boyfriend that she was cheating on him. Update. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. Remember I told you guys that she was bullying me online and she broke my car window? Well, it gets a lot worse. A few days later, after Self-Care Sister posted a story time, my ex-bestie found out. She came over to my house with a random man. I happened to be outside of my garage. She walks up to me with this guy and grabs me by the arm and pushes me into her car. I managed to get out and ran away. I went to my neighbors and we called the police. I now have a restraining order, but this girl keeps coming around. By the way, her ex took her back. He told me that she pressured him back into the relationship. She's crazy, and now I'm scared.
Am I the asshole for not being attracted to my husband and speaking to other men? This is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. Been married to my husband for 13 years now. That's so long. Did not have the most romantic relationship when we first started dating. He's a molecular scientist, which means he's very heady. There is not one single romantic bone in this man's body. Of course, he's always been kind and sweet and considerate. When we first started dating, we would go out on fun dates. Loved hiking, rafting, mountain biking. But when it came to romantic dates, he had no clue. I was the one that would ask him if he wanted to go to dinner. Made the first move when I kissed him. In fact, he didn't even kiss me back. During the first year of our relationship, he was very unaffectionate. I was always telling him how I wanted him to kiss me or hug me. He would just shy away. I clearly underestimated just how shy he was because of the fact that he never initiated anything. At first I thought that he might have been gay, but it was proven wrong when we had done it for the first time. I mean, he went through it and he was excited and it happened. But still, there was always a lack of affection. When we greeted each other, I would be the one to kiss him. He would just put his arm around me momentarily. I wanted to accept that this is just his personality, but I just couldn't. I wanted romance and passion. I just wasn't getting even a little bit of that from him. Not even with his words. Never
never gave me compliments the way that I did. I would compliment him all the time. If you're wondering if I was attracted to him then, I was. In fact, I was very attracted to him. I was definitely attracted to him physically, yes. He was in great shape at the time that we met, but I was also attracted to his mind. He was very determined and disciplined. He was also incredibly intelligent and wrote really well. For all of these reasons, I fell in love with him. He also did treat me well, although he wasn't as affectionate as I wanted him to be. But it just kept getting worse and worse. I would be the one to spend the night at his place all the time. He never offered to come over to my apartment, so eventually I moved in with him. This led to us fighting almost every single night because he never wanted to do it. I would ask him what was wrong and he would say nothing, I'm just tired. Or he gave me the classic answer of my head hurts. I couldn't believe it because I was definitely out of his league. I was the one that was constantly getting hit on. No matter where I went, I was always getting hit on. He knew this but didn't care. He also happens to not be jealous at all, which at first I did like this because it meant that we wouldn't have problems about him being controlling or not trusting me. But eventually I started thinking that it meant he didn't care if other men hit on me. Therefore, he didn't care if I talked to other guys or cheated on him. When I asked him one time if he would forgive me if I cheated, he said, yeah, of course. I also have many male friends and I would hang out with them all the time. And I know that this is probably stupid, but I wanted him to get jealous and he never did. He would say, go have fun, which at the end of the day, I know is a blessing to be with somebody who is not jealous because he gives you your freedom. But it made me feel like he just didn't care about me. That in combination with the fact that he barely ever touched me, it was really alarming. Finally threatened to break up with him after 3 years. I told him I wanted a man that was attracted to me, that loved me, that touched me, that kissed me, a man that does all the things he wants to do to his partner, in a loving way, of course. And to this, he just said, wow, that's really annoying that you have to bring that up right now. At the time, he was working on a thesis and doing a bunch of work stuff. I knew it was a very stressful time for him, but I wondered why he never wanted to be with me. I would think if you're stressed with work, you'd want to spend time with your partner and vent to them and be with them. But no, it was the opposite with him. He prioritized his job, which I understood. When he was working, he was always trying to be alone. Fast forward and we've been together 12 years. He still is kind and considerate and loving. He'll make me food, wash my clothes. I do plenty of things for him as well, but I'm the more romantic one. So I'm constantly trying to ask him if he wants to go out on a date. But the problem is I've lost all attraction to him. He doesn't prioritize his health anymore, so he's gained weight. Of course, I never want to make him feel bad, so it's not like I can tell him, hey, can you get back in shape? Recently, I started hanging out with old friends, and this led me to seeing older friends. 2 of them being men that I knew were attracted to me back in the day. One of them didn't realize I was married and asked me out on a date. I was so tempted to say yes, but I did give him my number. He's been texting me and it's been exciting. He voices how attractive he thinks I am. And yes, he knows that I'm married, but it's still just fun. I want to experience some sort of passion. I want to be held and loved. I want to be desired. Is that so bad? I told my husband that I needed more from him, i.e. passion, and he basically told me that wasn't in the cards with us. That we're at a point in our relationship where we're a married couple, and that married couples don't have passion in their relationships. Therefore, I should just get used to it. Another old friend started texting me and I've been texting him consistently. And it makes me feel good to be desired by these guys. I don't feel guilty at all. Should I stop talking to them? Or should I divorce my husband? What should I do? Self-care sister out. Am I the asshole for stalking my ex-boyfriend? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sending me on Instagram. Send me your story times on Instagram so I can share them here. Everyone in my life thinks I'm crazy and obsessed with my ex-boyfriend. My ex and I actually started off as best friends. We met through mutual friends and I was not attracted to him at all. So when I say we were best friends, it was just best friends. After a year of getting really close to him, I noticed that he started changing. It really upset me because he was my best friend at the time. Anytime I needed to talk to somebody that I knew cared about me, I would call him. He actually came to replace my female best friend. At the time, I was dating a couple of guys, and things were just very complicated, and he gave me very, very good advice. Like I said, he started to change, and I knew that something was wrong. My friend group loves Halloween. We were all planning to do something really fun and exciting, so everyone was coordinating their costumes. Of course, I had to ask my best friend if he wanted to coordinate with me. He suggested that we go as the Addams family, and I was totally down. We were so invested in our costumes, and everything was absolutely amazing. Halloween rolled around, and we all went to a house party. This is when I noticed he was acting really strange. He started avoiding me throughout the party, and I asked him what was wrong, and he'd had a couple of drinks, so he confessed that he had feelings for me. I was actually truly in shock. I never ever thought that he had feelings for me in that way. Honestly, I felt betrayed. Up until that point, I thought we were just friends. I'd been sharing very intimate details about my relationships with these guys. A couple of times I had also changed in front of him. And I only did all of this because I thought he had zero interest in me. But when he confessed that he was in love with me, I actually began to cry. He asked me why I was crying and I told him. He apologized and told me that he was in love with me from the moment he met me. I was extremely uncomfortable with this idea. I didn't speak to him for about 2 months. I definitely needed time to myself and to figure out if I even wanted to be his friend anymore. And I also wanted him to figure out if he was willing to be my friend. Because I can't be friends with somebody that I'm in love with, especially if they don't love me back. He finally reached out to me on my birthday and we all went out together. That night, something happened though. I saw him differently. Instead, I was seeing him more like a man, not as my bestie. I don't know how that happened, it just did. It's like I was seeing him in a new light and everything was changing. I asked him if he wanted to hang out and he said yes. We ended up hanging out at my place later that week. And I went for it. I gave him a kiss and he was actually super shocked. He thought that I was going to tell him that I didn't want to be his friend anymore. And as soon as I kissed him, he actually started to laugh. He told me that he always knew that I felt something for him, but that I just couldn't see it at the time. After that, our relationship escalated quickly. I mean, we moved in together 2 weeks later. My family thought we were going way too fast, but I was kind of ready for it. At that point, we've been best friends for a year. I knew him inside and out, and he knew me. A couple of months later, he proposed and I said yes. I was so in love and so infatuated. I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. And then, of course, things started to change. I noticed he started getting a short temper. For example, if I did something that annoyed him, he would give me the silent treatment. And he began to get more and more annoyed of me. This progressed throughout weeks. And a couple of weeks before the wedding, he actually talked to me and told me that he was feeling different about it. He said he needed time to think about it, because as soon as we moved in, he started noticing things about me that he didn't like. Obviously, this was actually shocking to my system. I never, ever thought that he would say that. Honestly, there was so many things about him that annoyed me as soon as we moved in together too, but I just dealt with it. I knew that moving in with somebody would be difficult, but to him, it was like a realization that maybe he didn't want to be with me. But because I respect him, I gave him the space he needed. He ended up moving out, and after that, he ghosted me. This was even more shocking. This man was my constant. He was my rock, my best friend, the person I literally said everything to. I had zero secrets from him, and suddenly he was gone. Not only that, but he left me with all the rent. So I got stuck having to pay $2,600 in rent every single month. I was angry, but also super in love. Now, I don't want to say I became obsessed, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. I wanted to know where he was, what he was doing, who he was talking to. And this is when a friend told me that he was eating off of someone else's plate. In other words, he was cheating on me. Or that at the very least, he had fallen in love with somebody else. And that's why he left. I started going to his job and he would refuse to talk to me. And there was no way I could get in contact with him because he blocked me. Before I knew it, I started following him everywhere. I even got fired from my job because I was showing up late all the time. But I couldn't help myself. I wanted to know why he left me.
This is embarrassing to admit, but I started following him everywhere. This is when I saw that he was going on several dates with different women. Then I started stalking the girls that he was going on dates with. I mean, maybe stalking is too strong of a word. I followed them once or twice, but I mostly started following him around almost every day. I was finally able to corner him at his gym. He literally tried to run away. I had to put my car in front of his car so he wouldn't leave. I asked him why he ghosted me, and he said he just didn't want to deal with it. And I was so angry with him. How could he do that to me after he was the one that was in love first? And the way he left me with the rent and all the bills to pay? He told me he'd pay me for the rent if I left him alone. Later that day, he sent me about $10,000, which did help, but still, it's been months and I still follow him at least twice a week. And I think he has a new girlfriend. I've seen her, I found out where she lived, and I go to her place and he's sometimes there. Am I wrong for this?